It's something quite obvious to say, but China is very cheap and very good at making things. So this change sounds like it's going to be expensive. Who will bear the cost?
The German economy, like the European economy. So it will be safer but more expensive. Everybody is actually ready for that. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, we know that it will cost much more in the energy sector, so why not in other sectors? But security costs.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Furnival. You are watching or listening to an OSW interview. Today I'll be talking to Dr. Sebastian Pulchenik, an expert from OSW's Germany and Northern Europe department. We'll be discussing Germany's changing stance on China. Hi, Sebastian.
Hi, hello.
Germany has a new strategy on China. Is this something new for Germany? Is it a new strategy or a completely new idea?
It is something new because so far Germany has no specific strategy, this kind of document like on China. So this is why we can talk about a kind of new thing in the German foreign policy.
I believe it took quite a long time to draw up. Germany has a coalition government. Why did it take so long, and what were the disagreements within the coalition?
So China is a very difficult issue for Germany.
Quite an important one.
Yeah, first of all, look at economic dependency. So trade is about 300 billion euro. This is data from 2022. So this shows how much dependent Germany on China is, and how difficult it is to design a responsible strategy. Because one thing is talking about how to manage relations with China, how to convince China to be more fair in mutual relations, how to be more cooperative, how to be more responsible in terms of human rights. There are many things. But on the other hand, it is important to keep the trade, the economic exchange open. So this was the main difficulty in the process of designing the strategy. You had the Social Democrats, which are focused on the condition of the economy.
And the Social Democrats, this is where Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And of course, Scholz is very concerned about potential effects of a sudden cut of the mutual connection, so the so-called decoupling. On the other hand, you had the Greens, which are much more radical. They demand bold steps towards China.
And the Greens are in charge of the foreign ministry.
The Greens are in charge of the foreign ministry, but also the Ministry of Economy. So the influence is pretty significant. But this conflict had paralyzed the common approach towards China in the government.
Germany has not just suddenly started trading with China. It's been trading for decades. So why has this strategy suddenly become important?
I think here the experience of the Ukrainian war is decisive, because Germany realized that if they are too dependent on certain economic partners, which are, by the way, autocracies, they can harm the German economy, the German stability. So the lesson of shifting within few months supply of energy in the German economy was very painful. Mm-hmm. So Germany does not want to repeat the same mistake. So this is why they started to talk about a new strategy towards China, mm-hmm. not to be so much exposed to certain crises. Mm-hmm. We can talk here about invasion on Taiwan or other crises, but mm-hmm. Germany does not want to repeat this kind of a mistake. This is one thing, but other issue are German companies in China. They complain that the Chinese government is not fair, imposing new regulations, new controls, which to some extent make Chinese business too difficult to sustain.
A Chinese business, so doing business in China for German companies.
Doing business in China, particularly for smaller companies which have not so extensive capacities in legal departments that they can cope with some regulations. So quite often they give up the Chinese business.
Could we take half a step backwards though? Because you mentioned, the problems connected with the war in Ukraine and having to find new sources of energy, not from Russia. Germany doesn't rely on its energy. It doesn't rely on China for its energy. But what does it rely on? What would be traumatizing in the same way if China invaded Taiwan, for example?
If we talk about dependency on Russia, this is mainly energy. And when we talk about dependency on China, this is about everything. Basically. Imports,
everything except energy.
But to some extent, also energy, because in the production of renewables, you need components from China. So here dependency is also quite visible. You have focal branches of the German industry, like automotive industry, very dependent on what is going on in Chinese market. You have direct investment on the Chinese market, over 100 billion euro from the German side. So it's really hard to say which branches could feel safe in case of a crisis of economic cooperation and political relations with China.
Part of this strategy is to reduce the risk. You mentioned that decoupling from China would be impractical. So what will happen? What are the alternatives to China, and how far can those alternatives be followed?
In the last year, in the middle of the war, the idea of decoupling became quite popular. So many experts were analyzing possibilities of doing that. After this period of discussion, we know that, for example, the United States is very much interested in decoupling. To some extent, also the European Commission. There are many ideas about how to control activity of European companies in China, which would be part of this quite radical decoupling, because it is not anymore a free decision of companies to invest there, but there is state control imposed on that. So the German idea is different. It's called derisking. Derisking is not about cutting cooperation. It's not about decoupling. It's about keeping cooperation open, but in addition to existing channels of exchange, Germany needs more cooperation with Brazil, with India, with Indonesia, with other countries. So in a way, Chinese cooperation must be backed by connections with other countries. So what is unique in this de-risking approach is that there is no talk about any end of globalization. It means more globalization in practice. So this means also more advantageous position for the German economy, because we should not forget that its prosperity is based on globalization and expanding exports. So this is one thing. Another thing is that this strategy says that companies, business should be responsible for cooperation with China. The state should not impose too much on them, should not restrict them too much, but in case there is a crisis, they should they should be responsible for all costs.
So we're talking about
arising.
some of these
Like Taiwan
enormous
invasion. So the German companies which are involved in Chinese business should not expect too much support, financial support from the German state. So they should calculate how risky is Chinese business, and if it's too risky, they should diversify the international connection.
So there are many German corporations which could be termed too big to fail. So
Absolutely.
So this is simply they have to diversify so the state doesn't need to bail them out. They can bail themselves out.
Exactly. Of course, the German government will talk to business organizations, will try to convince them to diversify their links to China. But in a few cases, there will be strict regulation. And this will rather concern Chinese investments in Germany, in critical infrastructure like harbors, like railway, telecommunication, branches which are focal for functioning of the German economic system.
It's something quite obvious to say, but China is very cheap and very good at making things. So this change sounds like it's going to be expensive. Who will bear the cost?
The German economy, like the European economy. So it will be safer but more expensive. Everybody is actually ready for that. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, we know that it will cost much more in the energy sector. So why not in other sectors? But security costs. Yeah. So this is the main message also from the strategy.
So this new strategy is a lot less friendly towards China, and China is known to be rather sensitive diplomatically. What has the reaction been?
The reaction was not too intense, I would say. Also because the German government decided not to make a big show. By the presentation of this strategy. It was a presentation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but the German Chancellor was actually not present. This is the difference. This is a difference in comparison to the security strategy, which was presented earlier this year. And there were definitely more ministers by this presentation. So, in my opinion, Chancellor Scholz decided to gain a bit more space for interpretation, for explanation, if the Chinese side criticizes the strategy. But China does not want to make a big issue from this strategy because they need Germany as the most dependent partner in Europe to convince the European Union for a kind of softer approach towards China. Although at the same time, China says that there will be some cooperation offers towards the business, but at the same time also new restrictions. So it sounds like it gives Germany a choice whether you will try to be strict by the strategy, or rather consider this document as something broad, political, not really important for practical daily grind in business.
And I understand that at the moment it's still open to interpretation whether this is something very strict or merely a nice grand idea.
And also time, because we don't know when exactly the measures mentioned in the strategy will be taken into consideration as a legal form. Yeah? So there is a lot of political space for interpretation and for negotiations.
Okay, I wanted to move on to a final point, which is that Germany has for many decades been growing in importance on the world stage, and it has been accused many times of not pulling its weight being very soft on Russia, being very soft on China, and at the same time making lots of money, but by creating instability. So it's taken quite a strong stance on Russia. Now it's changing its strategy on China. Why is Germany suddenly pulling its weight? Has it found itself a very important role in the world, or is it simply completely necessary for Germany to take this kind of action?
Because economic costs of instability, political instability, are simply too high.
Mm-hmm.
And another point is that United States is not able to guarantee stability of the global system. Other countries, other regions should contribute. So Germany, in the post-war time, was in a very comfortable situation because security issues were managed by other countries like United States, United Kingdom, France. And Germany was actually free to deal with business, to making business with different regions of the world, even with autocratic countries. Now it's time for Germany to contribute to the stability of the global system and to creation of a system which is actually a friendly environment for democracies. Because if globalization allows autocracies to grow and put other countries under pressure, this is not a globalization we would like to see in the future.
Okay. Sebastian, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this OSW interview. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with all future content.